Welcome back to the Ignore the Template podcast, the only FPL podcast on the entire internet that is hosted by me. That is true. My name is Devin, and today we are kind of doing a follow-up of the previous video where I kind of alluded to the fact that I think Big at the Back will be back largely in the meta. And this is to kind of what I want to do is break down basically what I view as the only choice in FPL right now, which is Haaland or no Haaland. And that will help, I think, show that Big at the Back will be the most useful thing to making either of those two drafts work. So if you do enjoy this kind of content, like, subscribe, all that stuff, it does help. I think, I don't know, I'm not good at this, but yeah, if we make the number go up, that would be cool. And let's get into it. Let's kick things off with a demonstration, shall we? So I am on fpl.team for those on YouTube able to view it. And we have a very stupid draft in front of us. And for those that are able to see it, they may have spotted a few issues. So number one, way over budget. Number two, that's a dumb bench. Why do you have all those good players on the bench? Number three, too many Man City, too many Arsenal players. So there's a lot of things wrong with this draft. We will get to correcting it in a second. The reason I put all these players into this draft is this is a team with Haaland, but without Bruno Fernandes. And then from there, every single highest points per game player jammed into this team, whether they like it or not. So that's why we're over budget. That's why we've got too many Arsenal and Man City players. And then we're going to compare this to the Bruno no Haaland draft. And then we're going to do the final demonstration where we try to jam Bruno, Haaland, and Gabriel all into the same draft and just show how easy it is to make a team a good team this year. So I have a lot of thoughts, but I will hopefully try to save those to a better segment. Let's start with this demonstration first. And one thing I want to note is that I'm not saying that each of these players are the best players or anything like that. If I'm completely honest, I think the differences between so many of these players and then players that you would probably recommend in the comments, the differences are incredibly minor. Like, if I felt strongly that Bukayo Saka is going to be this amazing talent and yada yada, yeah, we could have him in the team. But by and large, the players that performed very, very well last season, I think will probably perform pretty well this season. So these are all the best performers from last season. And then given the context of the season and players that you think might have a bigger breakout compared to how these players did the previous season, we can make all those sorts of arguments. But this is just for demonstration purposes to show that you could make a good team and then from there use it as a template to make your own changes. But I think this is a pretty good start, just starting with all of the highest points per game players and then bringing the budget and the player requirements into check. So let's start off. Let's fix the bench. So goalkeeper, we're just going to throw in a 4.0 goalkeeper in for, okay. Actually, let's start by reading who's actually in the team. So in goal, we've got David Raya and Donnarumma. Obviously, we don't need two starting goalkeepers like that. In defense, we've gone Gabriel, Gehi, Timber, Mukiele, and O'Reilly. In midfield, we've gone Semenyo, because obviously we don't have Bruno Fernandes, that is. We've got Semenyo, Bruno G, Rice, Gibbs White, and Keenan Dewsbury Hull. And then in the forward line, Haaland, João Pedro, and Thiago. So that's the team. Let's start by fixing the bench, because currently we have 24 million pounds just sitting on the bench, and we can bring that easily, comfortably to 17.5 with the corrections I'm about to make. And then that way we could save 6.5 million. And then we basically just need to figure out how to save an additional 6 million to make this team ready for game week 1. So Donnarumma, we are going to swap out for any 4.0 million. This is just going to be a stand-in. Again, if you have a favorite 4.0 million goalkeeper, go with that. Mukiele, we can swap to a 4.5, or if you want to even be more generous and bring it down to a bench of 17 million, you can go to like a Diop or something like that. For this purpose, I'm just going to go to Mitchell, bring him in. I think he's pretty good for 4.5. And this is a little slow, so I might be pausing in between. Yeah, I think something's going on with FPL.team. It is incredibly laggy. No offense, I really do like the site, but something's going on, and I don't think it's my computer. But I fixed the bench, so instead of Mukiele, O'Reilly, and Keenan Dewsbury Hall, Donnarumma, I've gone Palmer, the Ipswich goalkeeper, Mitchell from Crystal Palace, Ola Aina from Nottingham Forest, and Slater from Hull. So now we just need to find 6 million, as I said, and there's some clear things. So I did this in order of players on the left having the highest scoring points per match, and then players on the right are the lowest relative. So I think the next player I would probably think to downgrade would probably be Gibbs White. I think most people would probably defer to like a Timber. And again, these could be other players in that high tier defensive market. This, again, demonstration purposes, I promise. But the two players I would probably look to downgrade would be Gibbs White and Thiago. Let's start with Thiago, because I think there's a very, very easy substitution there, and I think he's going to be popular, and especially after he scored a brace against Liverpool, I think Calvert-Lewin would be the perfect option to swap in for Thiago. And then from there, I think Gibbs White we talked about, so we can swap him down now that we've got Calvert-Lewin in for Thiago. Let's see who we can bring in for Gibbs White. And we've gone ahead and swapped Gibbs White for Enzo Lefebvre on penalties, a lot to like, only 6 million. So now we just need to make up 2 million for this Haaland draft, which was always going to be the most difficult one, apart from fitting every player in. But yeah, now we just need to find 2 million, and we still have too many Arsenal players. So I think the next logical step, let's swap out Rice for somebody that would be affordable. And I think there's a name that's on my mind, is on penalties. I think very popular in the Reddit meta at the moment. And again, we can nickel and dime a lot of these different positions. Like Timber, you can go down to Calafiori and save the money. You know, Gehi, you can go to Mateus Nunes. You can find ways to fit this. It's just, I'm going with the highest points per game. And here is the Haaland draft. This is why you see so many teams that look almost exactly like this. But again, some of the players are just going to be like interchanged with somebody who's very similar. So Bruno G might be Anderson, Semenyo then might be Gibbs White. Like it's just a much of muchness, if that's the phrase. So I wouldn't get bogged down on like specific names. I think so many of these players that are similarly priced are going to be similarly contributing in FPL. I don't think the difference between X player and Y player for the most part is massive, especially if they have like a decent enough ownership. I think the online world has some key into who's going to be performing and who's not. Again, ownership is not everything, but this is all to say that really these differences are smaller than you probably think. This is just a template of what a Haaland draft would look like, and this is why this draft looks so similar to every Haaland draft that you've seen so far. And just to quickly pause on why this draft I think has a lot of positives is you've basically got the highest scoring goalkeeper, the goalkeeper I would predict to have the most points at the end of the season. You've got basically the highest, what I would anticipate is some of the highest scoring defenders in the game. Gabriel almost certainly going to be the highest scoring defender this season. I think Gehi, you could probably argue Gehi or O'Reilly. There's a 0.5 million difference between them. And then Timber versus Calafiori versus Hincapié versus Saliba. You get what I'm trying to say. Like you can make these little tiny changes. But for the most part, these players are probably going to score at the end of the season roughly the same, unless there's serious injury, of course, but points per game is going to be very close. And then in terms of the forward line, I think you have the best forward line possible, apart from, yeah, you're making a concession with Calvert-Lewin, but I think he's a very good value player. And yeah, kind of similarly for the midfield, you've got Semenyo, who almost certainly will be one of the highest scoring midfielders in the game outside of Bruno Fernandes and maybe Mbumo. But you could probably make the budget work to have Semenyo and Mbumo and Gibbs White if you want, but you have to make concessions elsewhere, right? That's FPL. So all of this to say, just to kind of sum this little segment up, even though you have Haaland and Gabriel, the only big players I feel like this team is missing out on is, out of the entire game, which is crazy, Bruno Fernandes and maybe like a Gibbs White / Mbumo. Other than that, I think it's about as close to perfect as you can get for a team. We've got a full playing bench apart from the goalkeeper, which maybe we will find a 4.0 playing goalkeeper. Still some preseason left to go, and injuries to happen and transfers to happen and all that. But really, you're not giving up a whole lot for this team, despite having the most expensive player in the game ever and the best defense. And yeah, there's a lot to like about this squad. And I think you're really, yeah, like I said, you're just really not giving up a lot. Now, moving on to the next demonstration, we've got the Bruno Fernandes no Haaland draft, which already off the top is going to be a lot easier to make a draft because we've got more money on the bench, I believe. Yeah, we've got 25.5 million on the bench. We could save 8 million just to change it to the same bench we had previously. And we're starting from only negative 10.5. So at the end of the day, we're only going to need to try to find 2.5 million from this team to make. So you're going to have to make fewer concessions, but obviously this is without Erling Haaland. So that's what we're weighing up. Okay, boom. The power of editing, we have changed the bench, and now we only need to drop an Arsenal player and save 2.5 million. So I think that one's going to be pretty easy. And with 2 moves, I made it happen. So I swapped Rice to Anderson, saved 1 million, and then I moved Watkins to Calvert-Lewin, and now we've got 0.5 million in the bank. Very few concessions. I would honestly argue that the only concessions in this entire team is the fact that you're not going with Haaland. And that's a big concession, but at least you can narrow it down to one player. Whereas in the previous draft, yeah, the midfield wasn't as strong, but this one I think is a very, very strong draft. And then obviously you could swap Thiago for Watkins if you have a preference there. And again, you can make all these like tiny minor changes that could save you money and allocate the money slightly differently. But from a template standpoint, looking at points per game, this one is going to be pretty solid. Now for the final demonstration, we're going to try to have Haaland, Bruno, and Gabriel into the same draft, and we might as well just work off of what we had. So I swapped Thiago for Haaland, and now we need to make up 7 million. And that's going to be challenging, I think. We also need to move on a Man City player, so we're probably going to drop Semenyo, in all honesty, just because he's 2 million more than Anderson, and we're going to really have to work a bit and save the budget to make all of this work. And that alone, the fact that we've already kind of cleared out the bench and we've gone with like kind of the ideal starting 11, but we still have to save 7 million. This is why I would make the choice Bruno or Haaland, not both. Because I think Gabriel performed to basically the same level as Bruno and Haaland. I wouldn't be dropping him. You guys know my viewpoint on that. I think he's the best value player in the game. Decent price. He's going to be getting goals, assists, clean. He's got so many more routes to points than some of these guys. Maybe not as explosive as a Haaland. So maybe captaincy, you go Haaland more, but I would make the one decision that we have in FPL and either drop Bruno or drop Haaland, not have both. But let's try to make this one work. And here's the team I was able to put together. So again, this confirms for me that we're just compromising in far too many areas. So to read off the team, I've gone from Raya to Kelleher. So I saved $1 million there, kept Gabriel, kept Gehi, went down from Timber to Calafiori. That saved me $1 million. Because I'm now playing a 4-4-2, I felt like instead of Mitchell, I had to kind of bulk up that defensive option a bit. So I've gone from Mitchell to Van Hecke. So that was actually an increase in price. I think he's probably one of the best 5.0 million defenders in the game at the moment, like roughly off the top of my head. But if you have a favorite, definitely swap in that 5 million. And in the midfield, Bruno Fernandes, Pascal Gross, Anton Stack, Anderson. So I went from Semenyo to Anderson or no, that was already in there. But yeah, basically Semenyo turned into Gross, and I can't remember who the Bruno G turned into Stack. And then we've got Haaland, João Pedro, and we had to drop Calvert-Lewin, who was in the starting 11, and we dropped him to a 4.5 million forward. So now the bench, another compromise. We have technically 2 non-playing players with Alex Palmer and Destin from Hull. So the bench is incredibly weak. I think you could argue the starting 11s in some areas is weaker. Like, yeah, you'd probably rather have Calvert-Lewin than Van Hecke, I would imagine, most instances. And then obviously you had to make big downgrades in the midfield. But this is a team that I think is totally viable if you want to go for the threemium, the Gabriel, Bruno, and Haaland, and have 3 of the best performers from last season. But as I've shown in previous videos, the optimized, like the mathematically optimized team is gonna not have 3 premiums. It's gonna have technically the optimized team has Gabriel, Bruno, and no Haaland. I'm skeptical of that because I understand beyond the optimization and beyond the math, there's more context that probably boosts players up and drops players down. Like, I think in my perception, Bruno is not going to have as good of a season, and I think Haaland could have a better season. So I'm taking that edge and saying I'm actually going to go with a Haaland no Bruno draft, but it's whatever flavor you prefer. Now, going back to the optimized team, now this is where we can contrast the previous teams, which I think pretty acceptably pretty sexy. I think most people would say these are pretty sexy teams. You got a lot of good attackers in there. Maybe especially this team. I really like this Haaland no Bruno draft personally. A little bit better than the Haaland, Bruno, and Gabriel draft, but if we were to compare that to those 3 drafts, technically the Bruno no Haaland draft included, which I kind of overwrote, and we compare that to the optimized team based on without the fixture difficulty rating factored in, so just points per game, this is the team that shows up for the most optimized team. It ends up being a 4-5-1. We do have 1 million in the bank, but we've got David Raya, so you're not making any concessions in defense, Mukiele, Gehi, Gabriel, and O'Reilly, and Aina on the bench. That I just went for that one. In the midfield, Bruno Fernandes, Bruno G, Semenyo, Gibbs White, Dewsbury Hall. And then in the forward line, you've got just João Pedro and then 2 dud forwards, but we do have that 1 million in the bench, on the bench. So in the bank for the bench, you know what I'm trying to say. But with that 1 million and maybe making some adjustments, I think you could make some concessions to, like, if you changed O'Reilly to Calafiori, which you can do, and I don't think that's a massive concession, but you're saving $1 million. And you know how I don't like to concede on defense. I think defense is where you're getting the most value, of course. But going there, you've got 2 million, and then can you upgrade this to a Calvert-Lewin? Yeah, and you actually still have 0.5 million in the bank, which, yeah, I probably wouldn't do anything with unless you wanted to bump Aina up or maybe Calafiori up to a 6 million. But this would be like the optimized team with a slight adjustment so that we can actually have a little bit more of a playing bench. And I'm sure there's even cheaper forwards like 5.5 or even 5 million you can make work. But this, I think, is a pretty good optimized team. And again, the only concession I feel like we're really making in this team is Haaland. And how similar is it? I overwrote that team, so I feel bad. But this team, I feel like, is pretty different from the no Haaland Bruno draft because there's a lot more in defense. And because we're, highlighting these high value defenders, you're able to just get more across the whole team. Bruno G, Semenyo, Gibbs White, Dewsbury Hall. You got the highest scoring midfielder in the game, the highest scoring defender in the game, the highest scoring goalkeeper in the game, the second highest scoring forward in the game. So there's a lot to like with the optimized draft. And again, just to kind of take a step back, it's it's too easy to make a good team this season. Now let's start talking about those caveats that I discussed at the very beginning of the video. If you could even remember that, there were a lot of things that I wanted to discuss regarding like the pricing being broken and whatnot. So there are a couple things I think could fix the balance of the game, but it was not intentional from FPL Towers, and it would have to be very lucky and is not confirmed. But here are my suggestions of what could happen that could actually fix the pricing structure and make the game more balanced going into probably not game week 1, but later on in the season. So if you will have watched the whole video, you probably didn't see any mention of Cole Palmer or Bukayo Saka, or I guess that's basically it, because those are the only two higher priced players that just have not been a factor for a lot of teams. And the reason is because they were so poor last season. I think even Rogers is not in the performing poor last season category. He's in the hasn't really been in any of my videos or suggestions. And that's just because it's a little bit uncertain, but he's kind of close to the price point of Saka and Palmer. But the reason I mentioned those two guys is if they start performing to the level of Haaland, even maybe not overall, but like on a week to week basis, or if they start performing to the level of Bruno Fernandes, then I think that could open the opportunity for there to be some differential gain. Like if you were to go for Saka instead of like a Bruno Fernandes, for instance, but still kind of have a similar squad structure, then you would be rewarded pretty heavily for going for a Saka or a Palmer. I think on the flip side, if you're having those players in and Haaland and you're having to sacrifice on defense, I think that could really hurt you. But yeah, trying to go back to my original point, the pricing structure would not be completely busted if we get some of those players, Palmer and Saka in particular, performing to what we know they can perform at and like actually playing like a premium. If we have more than like basically 2 premiums in the game, I think we're going to see a lot better of like the game perform a lot better and be a lot more fun, more engaging, more decisions to make. Because right now like the stats and the math do not support Palmer and Saka being part of the conversation in terms of like actual decisions. If you want to go out on the limb, and maybe you don't view it as risky, but the numbers would suggest that Saka and Palmer are risky. They're too high priced. They perform too poorly. If they can, like, there's a lot of ifs, like if they can get back into their form, if they can stay fit, if et cetera, then they could potentially compete. But all of the evidence we have now just really does not support that vision. So those two things could influence the overall gameplay for the better. The other thing that could happen, which has not been confirmed, but Vinicius Jr. is rumored to come to Arsenal. Having another premium, I think, opens up the gate a little bit more for the ownership to be spread out a little bit, and then these like pseudo differentials to form. If we have another high-priced premium player that a lot of people are actually going for, that's the key thing. Like we saw last season, it doesn't matter if Salah is a high-priced player. If nobody's going to go for him, then the differentials don't really appear. Nobody's really splitting their ownership across Haaland and Salah because the decision's easy. He just went for Haaland last season because Salah was performing so poorly. But if we did get somebody like a Vinicius Jr. or maybe, I don't know, Bradley Barcola could probably be like 9-10 million in FPL Towers terms. So if like Barcola went to Liverpool, Vinicius Jr. went to Arsenal, we may see a bit of a spreading out of the ownership, and that would be really good for the game. Now, playing devil's advocate to my own point, there are several things that happen throughout the season that are almost guaranteed to happen. There's two things in particular that come to mind. Number one, injuries to premiums. That's almost, maybe it's not almost certainly to happen, but it happens fairly regularly where we'll get a premium or something like that, be injured for some period of time, and then if there's only two premiums, you're just going to go from that one injured premium to the other premium, and then there's really no choice. So injuries are a possibility. Not saying it will happen, but it can happen and completely destroy the game. And number two, which this one almost certainly always happens, they priced some sort of player too low that has a breakout campaign and completely shatters the pricing structure. Everyone goes to that player, and it allows you to afford everyone in the game. Maybe that's an extreme representation of it, but obviously I'm thinking back to Palmer when he was 5 million and broke through, scoring 22 goals or whatever and 11 assists, whatever. So something like that or something similar to that could happen. We saw with like Harry Wilson last season to some degree. But to some degree, that almost always happens where a player is drastically underpriced, which is fair. You're not going to have the data and you're not going to know who all is going to outperform their price. That's why my suggestion always is to take all the prices, just float them up a little bit higher than you would. Generally, I think a more balanced approach would be best, but if you're going to do anything and you're just doing the easiest suggestion, just bring the prices up a bit so that it's not so infinitely easy to afford every single player in the game. So I think I'm going to leave the video there for today. I don't know why I put my hand up. Just ignore that if you're on YouTube. Yeah, I'll leave it there, but I hope that you found this engaging, or maybe this sparked some thought in you, because as much as there's content out there that's like, go for this player, and people we're sleeping on this player, and it's so much of a muchness with a lot of these players. I think we drastically overrate the differences between a lot of these players, and we focus way too much on X versus Y, when really the macro discussion of like, what's the real decision that we're making here? And I think the more I think about it, the more I feel that the only decision that we currently have in FPL, and of course this could change, as I said, you know, like Vinicius Jr., Bradley Barcola, that could shake things up in the Premier League or for FPL. But as things currently stand, the only decision in the game is whether to go with Bruno and no Haaland, or with Haaland and no Bruno. And that kind of sucks. And I feel like not only have I come to that conclusion on my own by like making these drafts and demonstrating it that way, but hopefully you all see that as well when you're on Reddit looking at the Rate My Team thread or whatever. I feel like all of the teams are basically the same, and that's not good for FPL. We want to see the ownership spread. We want to see differences so that our good decisions that go against the template can be rewarded. And then on the flip side, people that go with the wrong decision and have the wrong players in there, they get punished for that. I feel like that's like the whole essence of what FPL is being rewarded for good decisions and punished for bad decisions. And hopefully on average across the whole season, you make more good than bad. But as it kind of feels right now, it's like, well, if you went with Haaland, you did really well. But if you went without Haaland, if you went without Haaland, you still did pretty well, but like not as good. Like it just feels like there's no difference even between the only two drafts that we made. Even from that, there's really not much of a difference. So here's to hoping that we get some bigger players in the Premier League, and in the future and future FPL games, that they fix the pricing, because that's the whole game. It's a budget management game, whether you like it or not. So, yep, I'll leave you with that. Have a good one, and I'll see you next time. Bye.